Welcome to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture, with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Hello, English learners. Welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. My name is Michael, and I am really excited to bring you this episode today because we're continuing our long-running series on regions of the British Isles, or you might say English-speaking regions and countries, and we're continuing with Wales today. So in the past, we've looked at Scotland. We had teacher Ken to talk about Scotland. We looked at Ireland as well, where we had Ronan to talk with us. And now we're going to Wales, the other nation of Great Britain. I'm joined today by Dafydd Morse, and the reason I had a difficulty pronouncing his name is because he has a Welsh name, and this going to sound is really tough for me, but this is the Welsh version of the name David. So Dafydd kindly joined me for a talk today about Wales, so his country where he's from, the language, the culture, travel tips. We covered so many different things. We also spoke about kind of relationship between Wales and England, and there's a lot to get to here because many people might not realise the diversity of culture and language and history within this island, right, where I'm from. And there's far more than just English people here, and there's many more languages than just English language. So we cover all of that today. I really hope you enjoy it. I should mention as well that at some points during the episode, we did have a connection issue, and I think this mostly affected me, where I had trouble hearing what Dafydd was saying, and it may have led to some awkward moments, simply because I couldn't quite hear what he said. However, because we have both sides of the audio, I think you should be able to hear it fine. So maybe you guys will not notice the bad connection, but just keep in mind that I had some bad connection. So if there are any awkward moments, maybe it's because I'm awkward, but maybe it's because of the connection. So just keep that in mind. As I say every episode, if you do have problems following along with our conversation, you might be helped by the transcripts as well. So I have written a full transcript for this episode where you can see our full conversation and read along with what we're saying while you're listening. So some of you might find that helpful, and if you do, you can go to levelupenglish.school, click on the members button, and you'll have access to this transcript and every other transcript for all the episodes. So I hope that's useful for you. There'll also be a link in the show notes below if you want to have a look at that. But I won't delay any further because I'm looking forward to this chat. So let's get into our conversation now, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, English learners. Welcome back to the podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Dafydd.
Dafydd, yes.
We spoke before. I'm having problems with your name, but maybe rather than me butchering it anymore, could you give like an introduction of like who you are and how to pronounce your name and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my name is Dafydd. I am a Welshman. I'm a Welsh speaker and all-round language lover, life lover. I like to learn and do anything I can. So, yeah, pleasure to be here.
Okay, so maybe just to give a bit of an introduction to you and the listeners, like what I'm doing here. I've got like an ongoing series I've been doing for a while now where I'm like looking at different, I would say, English-speaking countries or regions of the British Isles or whatever you want to call it. I've done in the past Scotland and Ireland, kind of working my way around. And I thought Wales would be a good one now because I feel, let me know your opinion, but I feel like Wales is often, maybe on an international level, a lot of people don't know so much about Wales compared to, say, Scotland, for example. So I thought it would be great to shed some light on that.
Yeah, Wales has certainly got a branding problem on a global scale, that's for sure. We've got everything that Scotland and Ireland have got to offer. We've got history, we've got culture, we've got language, we've got excitement, but we just don't tell anybody about it.
Why do you think that is?
Great question. Why do I think? Wales has got a branding problem. I think it's partly a conscious decision and partly an unconscious decision. I think from our travel, we went to Anglesey with my family and my wife's family in the summer last year, and we went to some of the beaches along the kind of the Llŷn Peninsula, which is the arm bit. I don't know if you know what Wales looks like on a map, listeners, but Wales Wales got a little arm and a little head, and walking down the arm, you've got places which basically shut to tourists. So you're only allowed there if you're a local, because they don't want all the tourists coming in and making the beaches unpleasant for people who live there.
Ah.
I think it's partly a branding problem and partly a conscious decision not to be shouting all of our greatness to the rest of the world so that we can keep it to ourselves.
I like that. I like that. I didn't know about that. So how do they keep tourists out? How is that? How
It's
is that
just
managed there?
it's just like a locals only places. So like
Mm.
maybe memberships for local people. So the place we went to a golf club, and there was no like tourist members. You're only allowed to go to the restaurant or the bar if you were like a local, basically.
Oh wow. Okay, interesting. I've been to Wales a little bit, but not that far reach. Not to far-reaching places. So I need
Yeah,
to explore some more, I suppose. But I should mention, by the way, to listeners especially, that I came across you from Kirsten Cable from the Fluent Show, right? Because I believe you're working with her with Welsh, and also you appeared on her show as a guest recently.
yeah.
So I recommend that
So
to
yeah,
listeners
we
too.
connected over Instagram, and I am her Welsh tutor
Mm.
for some of her Welsh learning. And yeah, connected, became friends, and she invited me on the podcast, and it was a great honor and privilege, as it is with you here.
Thank you very much. But yeah, I imagine maybe we'll come back to like some Welsh language stuff later on. Although I do recommend to the listeners, maybe if they want to hear you and Kirsten talking a little bit more Welsh, like for longer sentences, maybe that podcast would be better than
Yeah,
this
we did
one
a
to really get an
bilingual
idea.
episode.
Maybe let's start with the basics, because I know there might be a lot of people who around the world, they've maybe never heard of Wales. I mean, hopefully they have heard of it, but maybe they haven't. So, first of all, where is Wales? Very basic question.
It's a very basic question, very basic answer. Wales is in Europe, and that region of the world that we call Europe. Obviously, we're not in the European Union anymore, but it's a little country on the east side. No, wait, it's on the west side. A little country on the west side of the United Kingdom. So it's right next to England and next to Ireland, and it's the country that you travel to Ireland from if you're going on the boat. Well, you certainly can do
Yeah,
anyway.
perfect. I was actually planning that this year. We'll see if that actually happens, but I was
Yeah,
planning that for the summer. So yeah, that could be maybe included in a future video, perhaps.
absolutely.
Um,
The map of Wales looks like a mother with her arm out protecting her children. So she's got her arm out, and then she's got the head at the top, and then she's got some legs at the bottom. So it's thin in the middle and then wide at the bottom.
I have never noticed that, but I'm going to have a look at a map later and see if I can spot what you're talking about. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Absolutely.
You mentioned before that Wales is a country, and I think this is something that many people get confused about. Even people in Britain, right? Uh, like, is Wales a country? How is it different from England? How is it different from the UK? I know it's a very complicated question in some ways, but do you have any way to answer that?
So it is a very, very tricky question, and it's not one that I've really given a lot of thought about answering, because I think, of course, Wales is a country. Why would it not be a country? But then I had a little bit of a look on some of the dictionary definitions of a country, and they are very wide-ranging in what the dictionary calls a country. But Wikipedia calls a country as a distinct territorial body or political entity. It may be an independent sovereign state or part of a larger state as a non-sovereign or formally sovereign political division. A physical territory with a government. So, yes, we are a physical territory with a government, and the Welsh government came out with a statement in 2008 saying, Wales is not a principality. Although we are joined with England by land and we are part of Great Britain, Wales is a country in its own right. So there we go. That's a statement from the Welsh government.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a country then. But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to define sometimes. I mean, as I understand it, let me know if I'm wrong, but I know Scotland has its own kind of parliament and things like that. Wales, is it not quite the same? Maybe it's shared with London, or am I wrong about that?
So similarly to Scotland, Wales has its own devolved government. So the devolved nature of the government means that some of the aspects of public life, like health and education and agriculture, are all determined by the Welsh government. So they're all determined in Wales, which is why during COVID, Wales had separate health policies to England. So the government were making decisions on those things themselves. But there's some things that are not handed down, not devolved to the Welsh government. So I think something like finances, so we can't raise taxes. The government can't raise taxes themselves. That has to be done through the Parliament in Westminster.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if obviously it's very different, but in some ways, perhaps is it similar to how it works in the US, where you have like the US has this kind of federal law for the whole country, but each state also kind of has their own laws as well. Maybe it's somewhat similar, like there's some similarities, but also some differences.
So yeah, I mean, you could say there's a similarity there. I'm not entirely sure of the federal and the state laws. I don't know if you can, as a state, do something that's contrary to the federal law. I don't know if you can do that. Whereas the Welsh government,
I don't know.
Yeah, the Welsh government can obviously and have had different laws in terms of health issues and health, like keeping people safe from COVID and that kind of thing. So they're able to. They don't have to go via government. They don't have to go via Westminster to have that happen. So it's similar to Scotland. I think Scotland have got more devolved areas of law than Wales, but essentially there are some things that we make our own rules regardless of what England say, and then some things that we have English and Welsh law, which is all together then.
Yeah. Okay.
Although I'm not an expert.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't expect you to be an expert in everything. I'm just getting someone knowledgeable. That's knowledgeable on this topic to talk about it. More than me, I think I should mention that for you and the listeners, there's a shockingly I know a shockingly low amount when it comes to my own country and neighbours. So I think one thing that's evident in this series is just my ignorance on different regions around the island. So you have to forgive me if I ask any silly questions, but I guess it's a good chance for me and the listeners to learn as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not sure about something, there's a good chance that somebody in China or Mexico might not know either. So no silly questions.
Maybe one final basic question is how do you identify? Like I put in my notes here, do you identify as Welsh? Would you ever call yourself British? And I know the answer to this one, but would you ever call yourself English as well?
I identify as Welsh through and through, even though my deepest, darkest secret, which is going to be publicly revealed to the world to listen to, is I was actually born in England. So I was born in England, shock horror, and moved to Wales when I was must have been about 6 months old, and have grown up in Wales my entire life with a father who speaks Welsh and a mother who is Welsh but doesn't speak or didn't speak Welsh when I was growing up. So I definitely identify as Welsh. I only identify as British when I have to, like on passports, applications, and things like that. But yes, never English.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think most Welsh people would be offended if they were called English?
Yes. Most Welsh people would be offended if they were called English, and it depends on the politeness of the person whether they would pick up on that.
Yeah. So I think
They-
that's an important distinction to make. It's a bit confusing, but I think with some practice that the listeners could see there. I think it's somewhat similar in Cornwall. Of course, Cornwall is not considered to be a separate country, but there's still a lot of pride here. I think similar to Wales, and how there was like a recent movement in the last couple of decades, perhaps, to have more like options to put Cornwall or Cornish as your nationality. So it says like Cornish or English or something like that. I
Yeah,
think many people will opt for putting Cornish if it's possible, but of course, most of the time, it's not the option. So
yeah.
I could imagine from that point of view as well.
When I was at school studying French, we went on French exchange and we went to Brittany. And it was really interesting to see the difference. Like all of us Welsh children would identify as Welsh rather than British. But lots of the Breton kids would identify as French rather than Breton. They didn't see Breton as a thing that identified them. So they were more attached to the the identity of being French rather than Breton, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. I wonder why that is, because Breton is another Celtic region, isn't it?
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm
exactly.
wrong. But
Yeah, yeah,
I wonder if it's. I always get the sense there's maybe more of a sense of shame sometimes with being associated with British or something. Maybe because of some historical moments and things like that.
yeah. Maybe. Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
was too young to delve any deeper into it, but it's certainly an interesting question, and it's different from say like a region in Spain, the Basque country, where
Mhm.
they would identify as Basque more than Spanish. And interestingly, and as a teacher, I've been involved with projects over in the Basque Country with trilingualism in schools and things like that. And what struck me as a contrast between Wales and the Basque Country is just the sheer number of Basque speakers compared to Welsh speakers. So percentage wise, they are, doing way better than Wales when it comes to percentage of speakers of the language. So
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But yeah,
yeah, very interesting
maybe
stuff.
it. Yeah. So, sorry if I'm talking over you. I should mention to the listeners as well. I don't think it will be obvious on the final recording, but for me, the connection's a little bit bad. So we might be interrupting each other a little bit, but hopefully it's not too obvious. So you mentioned the language a little bit just now, and maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about the Welsh language, right? Because I think many people are surprised to hear the diversity of languages, the variety of languages around the British Isles. Not just accent and dialect, of course, but actual completely different languages too. So maybe a question on some people's mind is Welsh connected to the English language in any way? Is there any connection there? Where does it come from? How is it different?
So Welsh is actually not connected to the English language at all. So there's no connection from the roots of both languages. As time has gone on, the dominance of English as the language of Britain, I guess, is certainly having an influence on Welsh. So there's lots more English idioms finding their way into Welsh language, English words finding themselves into the Welsh language, and so it's definitely being affected by English and the dominance of English, but initially there was no relationship. So Cymraeg is what we call the Welsh language in Welsh. So
Cymraeg.
Cymraeg, yes, excellent. So Cymraeg is a language which is actually native to the British Isles. So it's evolved from the Celtic language called Brythonic. So I don't know if you've covered that in any of your other podcasts with Cornish. I think Cornish is in the similar kind of family of languages that's kind of evolved from Brythonic, but it was kind of here around 600 BC. So it's around 600 BC that the Romans first came, and that's where kind of the Brythonic languages got its origin, I guess. Is that right?
Okay, so it's very old, and it's kind of...
So it's very old.
And yeah, as you said, I think Cornish is related closely.
Yeah, so Cornish and Scots Gaelic and Irish Gaelic all kind of evolved from this Brythonic language, which was spoken across the British Isles. And yeah, there was other Celtic languages that were spoken across the continent as far as Turkey. So that's a little bit of a fact for you.
Wow, okay.
But yeah, there are records of poetry and writings in Welsh from the 7th century. And what's really fascinating is that they are not unchanged to today's Welsh, but certainly comprehensible in terms of the language hasn't changed that much in 1300 years. So yeah, really interesting.
That's amazing. Yeah, so I imagine there's a lot of history that you can see within the language, right? Whereas if you look at English, for example, if you go back that long ago, it's practically incomprehensible, right? Yeah, it doesn't sound like English anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Amazing. Well, could you share maybe a couple basic phrases then? A couple basic phrases, like how do we say hello or thank you, for example?
Hello is hello. You could just say hello.
Nice.
Hello. Yeah,
Hello.
hello. A really common greeting is shumai. So shumai basically means
Shumai.
like how's it going? What's up? That kind of thing. So you can greet someone with shumai, and they can either answer with how it's actually going, or they can just say shumai back, and then your conversation is, your greeting is complete.
So it's a little bit like the English, all right, all right, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of equivalent to that, maybe. Yeah.
That is yes, exactly right. So yeah, that's an important word when you're meeting someone. Diolch is thank you. And croeso is you're welcome. So, if somebody gives you something.
Croeso?
Croeso. Yeah, excellent. Croeso and diolch. When I was at university, people would find out that I spoke Welsh and say, so I went to university in Canterbury, which is on the east side of England, which is basically as far east as you can get from Wales. And people were just surprised that Welsh actually was a language, that it existed, and they were surprised to find out that I actually spoke Welsh. And they'd always say, "Oh, say something in Welsh." And I got fed up of saying "bore da," which is good morning, "diolch," croeso. So I used to say, whenever people said, "just say something in Welsh," I used to just launch into bendigedig yw dy bryswylfod o arglwydd y lluoedd mae fy enaid yn hiraethu yn deheu hyd at lewig am gynteddau'r arglwydd, which is the start of Psalm 84.
Wow, that sounds great. Yeah. What was that, sorry?
It's the start of Psalm 84. So book of the Bible.
Wow, amazing.
Psalms.
You've memorized it.
Yeah. just for fun.
Nice. Yeah, amazing. It's really fascinating to hear. I wonder if anyone's wondering like how it sounds to a native English speaker. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but as someone who knows basically no Welsh language, to me it kind of sounds like how I imagine English would sound if you didn't understand it. So like when I hear someone speaking Welsh, it sounds like English, but when I listen carefully, it's like, wait, I don't understand it at all. I don't know if
Yeah.
you get the same feeling, or maybe not because you understand it fluently.
Yeah, so obviously with Welsh that doesn't happen, but I've seen a few YouTube videos of what would this sound like? What would different languages sound like if you didn't speak that language? And you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Whereas obviously if you're the native speaker of that language, you're like that's nonsense. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I
nice.
mean, I couldn't understand a word of what you said, but it's interesting to try to hear parallels because I heard, as you said, it's very closely related to the Cornish language, and surprisingly, it doesn't sound as similar as I thought. But I think one word I picked up on was, I forgot how you said it already, but how you said was it good morning or something, or good day, and I
Bore
think you said
da.
da, right?
Yeah.
Bore da. So da, I guess, means good, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely
so
right.
that's the same in Cornish. That simple word is the same, but
Oh,
the
great.
first part is totally different. In Cornish, it's like difta, difta.
Difta. Interesting because deef sounds a little bit like dydd, which is the Welsh word for day. So you could say dydd da,
Okay, okay,
which is like good day.
okay. So that's very similar. That's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
How is Welsh today then? Like the Welsh language, is it widely spoken today? Obviously, you speak it, but if anyone's visiting Wales, like how common is it in the modern age?
So it definitely depends on what area of Wales you go to. So the further west and the further north you get in the country, the more likely you are to hear Welsh round and about in the shops and what have you. Um, in the east, it's certainly not as common to hear Welsh spoken around. In Cardiff, um, interestingly, I grew up in West Wales and my wife is English. She's from Bath. And so when we moved to Cardiff, I was surprised at how little Welsh there was because it was compared to Carmarthen, which is my hometown. Um, it's just thinking, gosh, there's so little Welsh around. And then my wife would say, gosh, I'm hearing Welsh everywhere. I didn't realize there were so many people that spoke it. So it's just a different reference point. But yeah, roughly it's about 20% of the population that speak Welsh, according to the census. I haven't seen the 2021 data yet, actually. I probably should check that out. But yeah,
Do you think
2011.
it's coming back, or is it declining slowly?
So I think the Welsh government are putting massive emphasis on trying to get more Welsh speakers. They've got a big target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, I think, which is a massive growth from what is probably roughly about 600,000. So 600,000 Welsh speakers at the moment across Wales. And yeah, so the government are really pushing Welsh education. So my daughter goes to a Welsh language primary school. So her entire education is in Welsh, and it's in Cardiff, and there's more and more English schools kind of getting numbers dwindling, and the Welsh schools are kind of bursting at the seams because there's so much emphasis on Welsh education, and I think there's more awareness of the fact that multiple languages is good for your cognitive ability. It's good for your social skills. So having more languages is better and beneficial. And I would go as far as to say the more languages, the better. Um, but yeah, I think there's more and more understanding. Although, having said that, there's a long way to go to educate people in terms of second language education. Welsh language education is it's just a massive like leg up for your child in life. Having two languages over one is just so much better. So yeah, it's on the up at the moment. I think the real issue that the government and the Welsh language has is when people leave school, they unless they are specifically seeking out Welsh language jobs or Welsh language groups of friends or whatever, it's very easy to lose that. They just don't speak Welsh after they leave school. So Welsh language is increasing amongst the school age population, but not necessarily in the general population.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's hard to keep a language going when English is so widely spoken, and I guess there's no, as far as I understand, there's no need to know Welsh in most areas. And my experience when going to Wales was it's like I hear it spoken by like old people in the pub, like old
Mm.
guys speaking it, but I didn't see it. In everyday language, everyday conversation, it's in English, right? But I mean, maybe that's because I'm English, so I have a very biased point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible to get by in all of Wales without speaking a word of Welsh. Um, but as you and I both know, having the ability to speak a second language is a really special thing, and it's something that we certainly in Britain kind of don't really consider much. It's not something that a lot of British people would really say, oh yeah, bilingualism is important because we'll just expect everybody to speak English. But if you go to the right places, you will hear Welsh much more widely spoken, and it's certainly possible as a Welsh speaker to conduct a lot of your life in Welsh. So I have friends who have geared up their lives towards just mainly interacting in Welsh. So they have Welsh jobs, they speak Welsh at work, they have Welsh friends, they speak Welsh, with their families, and they socialize in Welsh. And yeah, they seek out Welsh doctors and Welsh dentists and that kind of thing. So it is possible to build a life which you mainly interact in Welsh, and it's just obviously much more challenging than going straight up English.
Yeah, so let's talk about travel for a second because I always encourage listeners, as much as I love London, I'm living in London at the moment, I always encourage listeners to explore outside of London if and when they do come to the UK. And I think especially these regions like in the far west, like Wales, are amazing to go to. I've been a little bit, I've been to like Brecon and Snowdonia, but not too many places other than that. But where would you recommend people to go, apart from these kind of secret, non-touristy places? But where would you recommend people visit if they can go to Wales?
Yeah, I was just going to say I could just recommend all the rubbish places and offend some people by sending them to Port Talbot. Sorry if you're listening from Port Talbot. Um, um, but yeah, no, I'll tell you the truth. The lovely places to go. So I absolutely love being in Pembrokeshire, and I absolutely love being in Anglesey. So they are the westernmost points, both south and north, and yeah, they're just beautiful beaches. In the north we've got mountains, and in the south we've got like farms and open fields, and it's really beautiful, stunning place to go. So yeah, Pembrokeshire and Anglesey is where I would recommend. And I would
Mm.
recommend, in terms of if you really want to get into the culture, come and visit the Eisteddfod. So the Eisteddfod is a big Welsh festival which happens every year in the first week of August, and it kind of moves around from north to south. So it's never in the same place. I say never. It moves around. It's not in the same place every year, and it's basically a collection of all of Welsh culture put together. So we've got poetry, we've got singing, we've got dancing, we've got competition, we've got music, we've got all sorts of stuff. Anything cultural that's to do with Wales, you'll find it at the Eisteddfod. And yeah, it's just a week-long festival where people can come and go and yeah, meet people from all parts of Wales, chat to people. There's a learner's tent, so there's great places to get involved.
Excellent. Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but I would like to visit myself. Maybe I should plan that. I was going to ask you about a good time to visit, but maybe August then will be a good
So
time,
yeah,
perhaps for
first week
that
of
reason, and
August.
maybe it's a bit warmer.
Yeah, I mean, guaranteed it's going to rain. Guaranteed. Because it always does. It always rains in the Eisteddfod week. It's just one of those things about Wales. So if you want a slightly nicer time of year for weather-wise, maybe come in, June. June, enjoy the beaches.
Mm.
It's a bit wet and miserable and cold in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere. So
Yeah.
any time from, kind of August through to April probably is miserable.
Depends what you're used to. I know I've got a lot of listeners from Saudi Arabia, and they're hearing
Okay.
cold, wet, and they think, "Oh, that sounds amazing." But yeah, for us, it's miserable.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to come and, walk around the coast in 3 degrees and driving rain, great. Come and visit.
Soggy feet. Yep.
Yeah. Although it is a great feeling when you go out and you come back and you have a cup of tea and a Welsh cake and a piece of bara brith, and it's just a feeling of enjoyment of I've conquered the weather.
I get the same feeling. So today, as we're recording, it's gloomy and cold and rainy, and I'm planning to go for maybe a bike ride or a walk this afternoon, and I'm fully expecting it to be miserable and horrible. But I know when I come back, I'm going to make a coffee. It's going to be all worth it. Like
Absolutely.
I've come back. I've made it home. It's a good feeling.
Yes.
Do you think that Wales, in terms of the landscape and I don't know what else, like architecture, that kind of stuff, is it very different to the rest of like England, for example?
I think it's quite varied. There's a lot of mountains and slate in the north. All along the coast, you've got beautiful beaches. You've got some really barren, hilly bits in the middle. So the middle of Wales, not very densely populated at all, because nobody wants to live there. Because there's just so much effort to get anywhere. It's hard to make a living in mid Wales. It's quite barren in places, but then you've got some big cities, Cardiff, Swansea, Carmarthen, Caernarfon, big cities which, if you're into the city life, you can have a good time. Which I wouldn't say is a lot different to the rest of the UK. I think it's more beautiful in many places, but I'm biased, and certainly the architecture
Yeah.
is not as stunning, not as special. That's because
Okay.
historically, I think Wales has had a lot less money than England, and so you don't get the beautiful, Cotswolds type feel that you might get. You don't get so many stunning big houses and all that kind of stuff. It's more like we'll just build what we can afford to build, which is less.
Okay, I see. Yeah. I mean, in my limited experience of going to Wales, I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but the countryside definitely looks different. I think it's very, very beautiful, of course. It's just something that's very different from where I've been in England. Maybe one part is like places I've been to are quite mountainous. So as you said, a lot of England, especially in the south, is very flat, and there's some of the tallest mountains, maybe excluding Scotland, on the island or in Wales, right? There's quite a few nice mountainous areas which I think are really beautiful to visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you might see like pictures of the Highlands in Scotland. Very beautiful. I think the word that I'd use to describe a lot of Wales is rugged. It's not well kept. It's not. It's just kind of nature doing its thing. as opposed to somewhere. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Kent in the east of England, and there's a lot of
Yeah, that's where I live. Yeah.
okay, so yeah, there's a lot of kind of controlled man-made beauty, orchards, oast houses, beautiful pubs, countryside which is kind of well kept. The borders are clearly defined, and it's quite, it's beautiful in its own way. But I think Wales is a kind of rugged feel to it.
Okay, so much more natural, much more rugged. Okay, that's good to know. It's good to know. Maybe one last thing we can touch on is culture.
Hmm.
This is much more abstract, but I wondered if like you have anything to say on like the mindset of Welsh people, maybe how it might be different to a Londoner, for example. I don't know if the relationship. It's kind of two questions, I suppose, but relationship between Welsh people and English people as well. How that is in your point of view.
Yeah,
Do you have
sure.
anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think in general, wherever you go in Wales, you will find people who are friendly, who are hospitable, and who are humble. Um, we don't like to think too much of ourselves, although we like to think as a nation that we're better than England. Just, I think it's almost like a subconscious thing, which is part of culture growing up as a child, seeing England as this like mean old big brother who bullies us, and he used to bully us throughout history, and so we have this kind of animosity towards the English, and the English, in, typically for somebody who's doing much better socially, politically, economically, whatever, they don't really think about the relationship that much. So it's something that Welsh people obsess about, obsessed about, their relationship with England, and it's summed up in a song which you can easily find on YouTube by typing in "I hate English rugby," which is so yeah.
I'll link to that. I'll link to that.
Yeah, I Hate English Rugby is a song which kind of sums up our feelings towards the English. I
Okay,
think, yeah, generally
it's
people are
interesting.
very welcoming,
Yeah.
but especially if you speak, if you make an effort to say, Shemai, Borada, and make an effort to do a little bit, as with probably most cultures, you know, if you make an effort with a language, people are, happy to like,
Mm.
oblige. I think
Oh, okay,
probably
interesting. So, do you
Wales
think it's the
could.
same in Cardiff?
Um, I think what London is to the rest of England, Cardiff is to Wales. So I don't know if that helps
Mhm,
you
mhm.
or any of your listeners to kind of gauge that relationship. So um, I think Londoners think of themselves as better than the rest of England, and certainly people who live in Cardiff think of themselves as better than the rest of Wales. I don't know if there's any legitimacy to any of that, but that's just the vibe that I get.
Okay. So I suppose if you said Shemai to someone in Cardiff, it it depends on who they are. They might not
Yeah,
know any Welsh, perhaps.
yeah. So there was a big push a number of years ago by the Welsh government, which was dechreuwch bob sgwrs yn Gymraeg, which basically means start every conversation in Welsh. And then if you start every conversation in Welsh, at least the other person then says, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I don't speak Welsh." And then you can carry on and you've not lost anything. Whereas if they do speak
Mm.
Welsh, you might not know that they speak Welsh, and you kind of have this moment of being able to share a moment speaking Welsh that you wouldn't have otherwise have had if you'd started your default conversation to be started in English. Um, so yeah,
Okay.
there we go.
So okay, that's good to know for me as well. So maybe I could give it a go. And I
Yeah,
mean,
I
my
mean,
worry is always like I don't want to seem like this stupid, almost like foreigner. Like I am a foreigner in some sense, aren't I? That I'm using the language when no one knows it, for example.
yeah. So you'd probably be best off in that situation, finding out a little bit about the person and finding out whether they do speak Welsh. And when you find out that they do speak Welsh, that's when you launch in with your best Shwmae, dwi'n dysgu Cymraeg, I'm learning Welsh. But yeah, you maybe wouldn't want
I'll
to
start reciting the Psalms.
Yes, reciting the Psalms. You might not want to start a conversation in Welsh if you're just visiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Okay. By the way, do you have? I've got one more like segment planned, but it depends on your free time. Do you have an extra 10 minutes now?
Yeah, I've got an extra 10 minutes. No worries.
So I also have a private podcast available to a smaller audience of my members, and on that podcast I like to talk to my guests just for 10 minutes at the end on like a different random topic.
Yeah.
I didn't prepare you for this, but I wondered if we could practice some, maybe kind of two questions. One is any slang or kind of interesting words in the Welsh language, and the other half of the question was any, how can I say it, like it's Welsh slang in the English language. So maybe like in, for example, Scotland, you might say, I'll have a wee bit of that. Like they will say wee to mean little, but it's within the English language, right? So I wonder if you have anything similar in Wales as well. If you want to hear the rest of this question, then check out my private podcast. Okay, back to the main episode. Perhaps before we do say goodbye, would you like to let people know where they can find out more about you? If people want to connect with you, if people want to find you on social media, for example, like what do you want to shout out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's probably not what your audience are really after, but I have a personal finance YouTube channel. So if you search for Dafydd Morse on YouTube, I've got a personal finance YouTube channel there. I've got Instagram, Dafydd Morse, which I don't do a lot with business-wise, but I'd like to in the future. And what else? I do have a podcast, Life to the Full. It's got 11 episodes, but I haven't produced any more episodes since last year, January. So something to be revived.
What's the podcast about?
Life to the Full. So it's basically about how to live life to the full. So there are like 5 areas of life which are vital to kind of live a good life. You need a good financial health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, and relational health. So if you've got health in all those 5 areas, then you're doing well. You're living a good life. So just trying to encourage people to live the best life.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, there we go.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, amazing.
Life to the full.
I do really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today because, as I said, maybe in my original message to you, like a lot of the audience are not, they're not maybe your normal audience. I've got a lot of English learners, and it's a little bit different for you. But I really think it's been very useful to learn a bit about Wales and hear from an expert such as yourself. And I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed it too. So I really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be on. And yeah, I love doing this kind of stuff. Just sharing my passion for Wales and helping people enjoy life.
Nice. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Great to meet you today and hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. See you soon.
You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.